Tale of Timmy Tiny, the thumb-sized hero. Once upon a time, nestled in a cozy little cottage at the edge of Whispering Woods, lived a kind, but very sad, old woman named Agnes. Agnes longed for a child to fill her days with laughter and joy. Every night, as she looked at the twinkling stars, she would whisper, "Oh, if only I had a little boy, even one as small as my thumb, I would be the happiest woman in the world." One morning, when Agnes woke up, she heard a tiny voice. "Good morning, Mother." Agnes blinked her eyes in disbelief. Perched on her bedside table was a little boy, no bigger than her thumb. He had bright, sparkling blue eyes, a mischievous grin, and hair the color of sunshine. Who are you?" Agnes gasped, her heart filled with a mixture of surprise and delight. "I'm Timmy Tiny," the little boy chirped. "You wished for a son, and here I am." Agnes scooped Timmy Tiny into her hand, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. He was exactly what she had always wanted. From that day on, Agnes and Timmy Tiny were inseparable. Now, Timmy Tiny, despite his size, was a very brave and resourceful little boy. He helped Agnes with all sorts of chores. He would ride on the back of the family cat, Whiskers, to fetch berries from the garden. He would use a thimble as a bucket to carry water, and he even helped Agnes sweep the floor by pushing a broom bristle by bristle. One sunny afternoon, Agnes decided to go to the market in the nearby town of Sunnybrook. "Timmy Tiny," she said, "I need to buy some flour. Would you like to come with me?" Timmy Tiny, always eager for adventure, clapped his tiny hands. "Oh yes, please, Mother. But how will I get there? It's such a long way." Agnes thought for a moment. "I know," she exclaimed. "I'll put you in my pocket, and you can peek out and tell me which way to go." So, Agnes carefully placed Timmy Tiny in her pocket, and they set off for Sunnybrook. As they walked along the dusty road, Timmy Tiny peeked out and guided Agnes, shouting, "Turn left, Mother. Now right. Watch out for that bumpy stone." Suddenly, a large, rumbling sound filled the air. A horse-drawn carriage, driven by a grumpy old merchant named Mr. Grumbles, came barreling down the road. Agnes tried to step aside, but it was too late. The carriage sped past, and the jostling threw Timmy Tiny right out of her pocket and into the road. "Timmy Tiny!" Agnes cried, but the carriage was already too far away. She turned back, her heart pounding, searching for her little son. Mr. Grumbles, unaware of the tiny passenger he had accidentally picked up, continued on his way to Sunnybrook. Timmy Tiny, although scared, was determined to get back to Agnes. He quickly realized he was trapped inside Mr. Grumbles' coat pocket. "Help! Let me out!" Timmy Tiny shouted as loud as he could, but his voice was so small, Mr. Grumbles couldn't hear him at all. Mr. Grumbles arrived at the market and began to unload his goods. He laid out bolts of colorful fabric, baskets of shiny apples, and jars of sweet honey. As he reached into his pocket for his coin purse, he felt something strange. "What's this?" he grumbled, pulling out Timmy Tiny. He held the tiny boy up to his eyes and stared in disbelief. "Well, what have we here?" "A tiny little man." Timmy Tiny, seeing his chance, pleaded, "Please, sir, let me go. I need to get back to my mother. She's very worried about me." Mr. Grumbles, who was known for being grumpy, surprised even himself. He looked at Timmy Tiny's earnest little face and felt a pang of sympathy. Perhaps because he was lonely himself, he said, stroking his chin. "You're a clever little fellow. Tell you what, I'll let you go, but only if you help me sell my goods. You can stand on my table and call out to the people to come and buy." Timmy Tiny, grateful for the opportunity, readily agreed. He climbed onto the table, stood tall, and in his loudest voice, which was still quite small, he began to shout, "Come one, come all! Buy the finest fabrics, the juiciest apples, and the sweetest honey in Sunnybrook. Don't miss out." The people of Sunnybrook were amazed to see such a tiny boy with such a big voice. They gathered around Mr. Grumble's table, curious and amused. Timmy Tiny's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon, everyone was buying something. The fabrics shimmered, the apples gleamed, and the honey sparkled under the little boy's enthusiastic salesmanship. Mr. Grumbles couldn't believe his eyes. He had never sold so much in one day. He was so pleased with Timmy Tiny's help that he decided to give him a reward. "Little fellow," he said, "you've done a wonderful job. As promised, you are free to go back to your mother. And as a thank you, take this gold coin." He carefully placed a tiny gold coin, no bigger than a button, into Timmy Tiny's hand. Timmy Tiny thanked Mr. Grumbles and, with the gold coin clutched tightly in his hand, he set off to find Agnes. He knew she would be worried sick. Meanwhile, Agnes had been searching everywhere for Timmy Tiny. She asked everyone she met if they had seen a tiny boy, but no one had. Her heart was heavy with sadness. Finally, as the sun began to set, she saw a tiny figure walking towards her. It was Timmy Tiny. "Mother!" Timmy Tiny cried, running into her arms. Agnes scooped him up and hugged him tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Oh, Timmy Tiny, I was so worried. Where have you been?" Timmy Tiny explained everything that had happened, from falling out of her pocket to helping Mr. Grumbles at the market. He then presented her with the tiny gold coin. Agnes was overjoyed to have Timmy Tiny back safe and sound. She thanked him for his bravery and his kindness. From that day on, Timmy Tiny and Agnes lived happily ever after. They were grateful for each other's love and companionship. Mr. Grumbles, too, learned a valuable lesson. He realized that even the smallest of creatures could bring great joy and that kindness was always the best reward. He even visited Agnes and Timmy Tiny from time to time, bringing them gifts of honey and apples. And so, the tale of Timmy Tiny, the thumb-sized hero, was told and retold throughout Whispering Woods and Sunnybrook, reminding everyone that even the smallest among us can be brave, kind, and make a big difference in the world. And that, most importantly, love and kindness are the greatest treasures of all.